All right. Yeah, I think it's all right. We're going.
Yeah, we're going.
All right, nice. We're back on the podcast. After not being on it for a month or so, which was the regular thing we do. Tonight we are with Jenkin and Michael Chang, poet from. Are you from New York originally, or you live in New York?
I live in New York, but I'm from outside of DC.
Okay, gotcha. Few books out by Michael: The Synthetic Jungle, Almanac of Useless Talents, and most recently, as of May. Right?
Beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
beautiful May.
Wait, hold on, sorry. The Many Things a Bright Boy Can. That's the title, right?
Yes.
Yes.
The word bright boy is in there. Things a bright boy can do. Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Sure.
Hell yeah. Okay. So I've kind of reached out to you beforehand a little bit, but for at least the first half of the discussion, I really want to talk sort of about various threads related to sort of comedicness and poetry,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, I mean I'll just get into the first question here. Like, firstly, like I want to like sincerely discuss sincerity, especially the trendiness of cultivated sincerity in contemporary poetry. So like at least in my estimation, and like sort of a lot of lauded, esteemed, prestige poetry circles,
Okay.
there appears to be like this aversion towards any semblance of irreverence. You know, there's no riffing. Nobody wants to riff. Nobody wants to have a bit or something, because you know if you're being funny, then you're not outpouring yourself and your emotional truth in a so-called like really romantic, really real way. Um, and like for me personally, like I'll lay my cards down. I don't really care for this. You know, I would call it a sort of like a crumble cookie Wordsworthism or something, because I find it to be a little ironically kind of bloodless. You know, they're trying to go for blood with the sincerity, but sometimes it feels a little bit contrived, because like in actuality, humor, sardonic observation, you know, a quipful critique, you know, that prosody cuts into the world in as much a deep way than the quintessential big feels, big meaning lyric poem, you know, it's about a tree that's actually a metonym for family or something. Um, I don't know, and I guess detractors might say that consistent humor is a sort of a barrier of unseriousness or something. But when I read your poetry, I find that the humor is actually often very empathetic. You know, it's very horizontally conversational, but often in a manner that's both jocular and fun, but also barbed too. So, like for example, in Mandela Effect, when you write like quote poets overcompensating with weeping mason jars, like, oh my god, no wonder people hate us. I mean, that joke hits really hard, and frankly I think it's more compellingly within 2025, you know, of this moment than the type of you know, poems about poetry that one is probably hearing right now at some campus reading or something. So that's a very long preamble, but the basic question is like, you know, why humor? What can humor do in a poem? How can the ostensibly unserious be actually more serious than sort of you know, a typical lyrical approach?
Well, I think people are afraid of humor in some cases, but I also think that a lot of poets just aren't very funny people or fun to hang out with. and and I think the work that they put out reflects that in a certain way. I mean, it's tidied up or whatever, but I think I really set out to be, I think there isn't much daylight between what you see on the page and how I am as a person. And I think part and parcel of that is, you know, I use humor in, my daily life, and I think there's no reason the work shouldn't reflect that. And I think in many ways, because the work is, kind of packaged and we spend time working on it and craft and whatever bullshit. I think, like that's even more reason I think to be deliberate and thoughtful and really kind of funny and get to workshop stuff, quote unquote, right? And I think in one of my um I think my very first workshop um um was led by this guy who had studied with one of my personal heroes, let's just say. And um his feedback to me was um that my work is really arm's length because of the humor, I guess, and that there's no piercing the veil of kind of, as if I were hiding something, but there really isn't much hiding, I don't think. And so like that kind of comment I think really reflects I think what you were talking about, which is like, oh, like the prevailing kind of uh feel or vibe is that, oh, it must be difficult or it must be uh secretive and I just don't think that my poetics certainly but poetry in general should operate that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake, were you gonna say something? Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I definitely. It's been a while since I've been in sort of like a formal workshop setting, but I don't know. I always remember like, comment somebody like made, I don't know, made something kind of juvenile, like a shit joke in the
Mhm.
poem. That was always like super frowned upon, even though, in that context, like that bit of childish vulgarity, I think it like it's connective in a way that's something that like more serious isn't. And also like, I don't know, it gets at it, if this is a humanistic endeavor, what's more humanistic than that jokingness? Like that's what people do together. So yeah, no, I definitely I I feel that. I feel that the seriousness and like big feels kind of become a cudgel in a lot of like sort of critical settings. Absolutely.
Michael, I wanted to ask you about kind of a textual element in this book in particular. I guess the like text slang and email like abbreviations that kind of run throughout it. Um, I guess like yeah, it's similar to like the use of like swarminess and humor as like a something that maybe brings you closer to reality or closer to you as a writer or person or thinker. I was really interested about both, I guess, the deployment of like abbreviated like filler words like about and with and how they're functioning throughout. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think as I mentioned earlier, I think part of it is just how I think and how we write these days. And I know we pretend, that we don't type that way, but I think most of us do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in my mind it's kind of like that's a small piece of it. But I think in my mind, um I think it better separates, I think for me, my poetry from like other writing that I do, like speech writing or kind of other more professional, legalese. Um, so in a way, it's kind of cabined off. And also, I think I realized, not to get into submitting so early in the thing, but like when I started submitting to places, I think um I was really motivated by the fact that, I wasn't really seeing poetry on the page that I thought was interesting and that stood out, and it was all this, kind of like you couldn't really tell what decade it was from.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was problematic because, um I don't know, that's just not interesting to me to see something that, could be from, World War II or something. Um And so it was kind of my, I guess, knee jerk reaction or you know, rebel yell, I guess, against that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, I guess like thinking about writing in the contemporary moment is like I really kind of find myself running into this feeling that sometimes the contemporary moment feels like a little too stupid to write about, and like approaching it in a way that feels like authentic to, I guess, like daily reality is like feels like a real tightrope, because I don't know, yeah, it's like no one wants to like see the book that's like these are memes and poems at the same time or something like that. But there is like a way to go about it that does kind of, I guess, yeah, I mean, express the ways in which we have kind of like both like bastardized and like over like efficiency, or made English overly efficient now, to like speak in codes to each other basically. And like I think putting that in your poetry is like, like quite revolutionary, or like at least brave, like, and because I think the risk is way higher than if you were to stick to something more standard, like you were saying. Like, I mean, the risk of making anything like that's like overly contemporary is like to like seem like you're pandering in a way. And I mean, do you feel that tension when you are writing these poems, or are you kind of not so much in your head about it?
I mean, I think I I I try to write what I like to read, and it shouldn't feel like explainy, right? Like it shouldn't feel, and it also shouldn't feel like I'm just scrolling the news, kind of on Twitter or whatever. Like it shouldn't feel like just a regurgitation of things we've seen before, and or news we've already know about. Um and I think that's always on my mind, I guess, when I'm writing, like what have people seen or heard before. I think that more broad, you know outside of current affairs, I think that more broadly, this sense of like I want to be refreshing and new, on many levels, but that really drives, I think, a lot of the work. Yeah.
Yeah, I was noticing, like as I read, I guess I was thinking how what people are, they sort of critical of, I guess, like the lockdown era type of poem, because it tries to be in that moment like so hard that it doesn't always like translate well. But and as I read your work, I don't know, I guess it kind of, I realized like I hadn't really reflected that much. Like I started my undergrad in 2013, and so much of things a bright boy can do, it felt like so much from the 2010s to now, like sort of coming together and swirling together, and it really helped me sort of just like reflect on like the past 12 years of my life that just for whatever reason, like I hadn't really like, oh, it was, I don't know, I guess it was just like, oh shit, remember that happened, or like, yeah, I don't know, it felt very meditative for me, and it felt very of the moment, like a sort of epochal writing without being so like, this is a poem about August 2020. Like it felt simultaneously very focused in its moment, but also there was an expansiveness to it that good writing that tries to capture sort of like temporal energy has. Um, yeah. Um, I have a question about gestures. Can I broach that up?
Mm,
Absolutely. Okay.
mm.
Um, and this sort of this expands the humor discussion. I noticed in sort of synoptic promo materials for things a bright boy can do, like the figure of the jester is invoked as a sort of model for the personas of the collection, and I found that very intriguing for two kind of tense colliding reasons. Like, so like historically speaking, and this is based on my very surface knowledge of like feudal court entertainment politics, but like a jester's a royally sanctioned comedic voice. They had jester's privilege, they could clown on nobles and wouldn't be disemboweled or what have you. But and I get why the jester is picked out, because it has the snarkiness, and that there's a sort of role to it, but also like the jester is sort of cozy with the king. The jester is an internal member, intimately linked to the court. And so I was thinking, like, well, a modern cognate of that, relationship, at least within creative writing, it seems to me to be often very much like, I don't know, akin to a poet laureate or something. But when I read your poetry, especially a poem like Baby Drive South, that's not a jester aligning themselves with the supposed, order of things. That's a jester gesturing with a fervor that has a lot more tooth to it. So a sort of anti-jester, if you will allow me the prefix. So, yeah, and that's just my reads. I kind of want to hear your definition on gesturing as a role or as a poetic practice. Like, what does it take to embody and express, I guess,
Well,
gesturness?
I think it really I think the role more touches upon like kind of I think as writers we have a lot of writers, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of writers want to get published, right? That's kind of the goal. And certainly if you're in a program, that's the goal. And I think so there needs to be that kind of jokey kind of rebel or anti-elite kind of um vibe, but also like you do need establishment um support and encouragement, and whether it's blurbs or like somebody from the establishment picking your manuscript for a contest or whatever. I think that you need these kind of um accolades or badges of legitimacy, I guess, validation. But and so I think that that's the tension for me, like how to be like kind of a credible kind of anti-establishment voice, but also get published in poetry magazine, like, or whatever people want to do. I don't know, but like whatever their dream magazine is. And I think I also think like at this point in my career, quote unquote, like I have more freedom because I have been published in these places. So like insofar as I cared at any moment about getting in, poetry, APR, whatever, like I think that's less concerning to me now. And I think I feel, I have more freedom. And I think, I don't need to rely really on kind of the contest model or, like I can send my stuff places. But so I will recognize that kind of freedom coming from having done it for a little bit. But I even starting, I think early on, I think I was hyper aware, like um if it doesn't, like, you can't I guess you can if you write in, in a little cave and nobody ever sees it, right? But like if you have some sort of like whatever your metric of success is, like I think people on some level realize, okay, like if the work looks so radically different and sounds different, then maybe there's something else that I should be doing to kind of go the other way, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like that poem in particular that Jenkins referencing, "Baby Drives South," was like a real moment for me in the collection where I was like, okay, wow, like this is more or less like the way I like think of things too. Is like I don't know, like having this moment where you're kind of both like wanting success in the writing world, but then like kind of looking at how freakish some of the people are that are like,
Mhm. Mhm.
that have success, and then kind of ask, like, I don't know, you have to kind of sort of ask yourself, okay, where do I fit in with these fucking people? And I think that poem in particular like really like brings that like energy to life. Like, and it's pretty funny. I looked up like I forgot why I googled Forrest Gander today, but if you look at his poetry foundation picture, have you guys seen this? The blue
No.
fedora.
Okay, let me take a gander at old Forrest Gander.
he's got like his like poetry foundation picture, which like I guess everyone will, if you Google Forrest Ganders, the first thing that comes up. It's like him wearing a fucking like blue fedora. Which brought me to the question. I mean, Michael, who do you think is the most like swagless poet out there right now? I saw a great
It's me.
picture.
It's me.
Yeah, it's Jenkins and South Bend. I saw a great picture of like Terrence Hayes, who like for all intents and purposes was like the sexy poet, like whenever he was like big, and it was like him walking around New York in like ripped skinny jeans and Adidas slides, and I was like, this is like the hot guy. Like, and so it's like I don't know, like I don't know what happens when you like enter into like that realm of being an industry lauded poet, but like I think you have to like you have your swag stripped from you, like, or something. You have to like dress poorly to get
Hey,
into
hey,
it.
hey! We're gonna be bringing back ripped skinny jeans pretty soon.
Yeah.
Baggy jeans have had their
That no,
moment.
that fit is back. That fit is back though. I think actually.
um, I will say also, like, I don't know. I'm dissertating right now, and
Hmm.
I have my poets that I'm looking at, and
Uh,
I do really like one of them is David Jones, and I really admire David Jones's poetry. But you also, you when you read through their stuff and you read through their letters and their ephemera, and it's just like, oh man, this guy kind of sucks. I don't like this guy. He believes some wacko shit. I don't think I would like being in a room with him. Um, I don't know. So, and when I was reading Baby Drives Out, it's just like there's a certain catharsis because it's like, yeah, I don't know that there's a tear that like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of freeing to know that, yeah, a person you kind of like at first idolized or first really respected or had some sort of reverence for. They're also, yeah, they're kind of freaky. They're kind of freaky with it, and I don't know. There's something freeing about that, especially with poetry that taking itself so extremely super seriously, but then you realize there's a gesturely ridiculousness that's sort of fundamental to to the art form. Um,
well, I think if like especially some of these poets who've been doing it a long time, um, I think they're just checked out. I really think a lot of them are really checked out. Like I think you either kind of find your groove or whatever, or, your the one poem you write really well, or you just like turn in complete shit. Like they're so checked out. I can't believe, some of the books that are being put out. Like and it's with presses that put out their like 5 previous books, right? Like it and so that I think is a problem, but yeah, I guess I just wanted to say that. But, like, I really think a lot of them are out of new ideas, or they're not interested, or they're talking to the same 3 people, or, like, I just don't get it. Like, especially the ones that live in the city, I just think, like, "Do you not go out?" Like, you're just in this kind of bubble, and you're not even writing about things that, are interesting or that resonate with anyone outside of your 3 to 5 kind of people in your age group, I guess, but
there needs to be some sort of program to send a poet just to South Bend, Indiana, baby. We'll get them out here. We'll get them to Papa Vinny's Italian restaurant. We'll get them thinking.
My
Um,
oh sorry.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
Mike, so your background initially, was it you were a lawyer initially? Is that right?
I'm still a lawyer
You
for the
still are a
record.
lawyer? Yeah. Okay.
Hell yeah.
Well, yeah, I guess like I mean, I think about that a lot in terms of like uh, how poets approach writing and how much like their day-to-day lives influence it. And like a lot of these people that we're talking about, and like these like checked out poets, like a lot of them are like instructors at various creative writing programs across America. And like uh it doesn't exactly introduce you to like a very like a wide variety of like daily experience, and like I think it's kind of a good environment, an easy environment to check out in. You choose to. But I mean, I think like I'm curious about your profession influencing the way that you write. I mean, there's like all there's obviously like corporate speak in here, and like I think interacting with people in that realm seems quite interesting and influential on the book.
Mhm. Well, I mean, I think to go back to what we were talking about earlier, which is like when you kind of work in government and like I have in the past, and you come in and even if it is a new administration, whatever, Biden or whatever, like you realize you're working within this system, and I think if you're willing to play, I think you realize like you have to find ways to work around the system or to like do the best job you can do within that framework, you know, and rather than be like Kamala and say that, she's checked out of politics. But like career politicians are, you know, saying that they're checked out of politics, but that's the only thing that they know really, supposedly. And I think, in terms of like the people that I meet a lot of interesting clients like in fashion, media in the city. Um, uh, and so, it's like you just need to get out more and overhear stuff and ask people what have you been thinking about? Like I just think I'm very interested in what um uh makes people tick because I worked and work in, for a long time in campaigns and so forth and national and otherwise. But I just don't like it's you can't be too kind of divorced from reality, I guess. Like you have to meet people um and even when we try really hard to meet different people, I know it doesn't always kind of it's still imperfect, right? But I think there needs to be that effort. And like I think a lot of poets um in academia maybe have other pressures or whatever, but like I just don't think they're interested. Like, they want students fawning over them or whatever, and none of which I'm interested in. And so, naturally that's going to be, you know, the work is going to turn out different simply because just the entire approach is going to be different, and how I see the world is going to be different than somebody, you know, in Washington Square or whatever.
Yeah, the sort of the malaise of the creative writing prof. I don't know. It seems like they have some sort of romantic like ideation that just like and then they realize that this is a job. This is a very insular job, but that's probably a super basic comment on it. Yeah. Do you mind if I sort of cycle back once
Mhm.
more to the I guess the meeting people factor,
Mhm.
and sort of like that discursiveness
Mhm.
that leads me back to a sort of a sitcom question that I have about things a bright boy can do.
Okay.
Um, so in Bright Boy, I see Jackie Daytona. I see South Park coming to the text. I see Mr. SquarePants. I'm sure there are other sitcomic characters and references that I didn't immediately pick up. Zac Efron makes at least one appearance. Um, like so for me, like as a dude who is like very much influenced by and interested in sort of comedy writing, like significantly more so than I don't know, like art house or experimental cinema. Like I absolutely would love to hear your thoughts on like sort of how comedic media impresses upon your writing. And and maybe this is because like I'm someone who perhaps shamefully like enjoys stand-up comedy, and I've always found my favorite poetry readings feature someone who knows how to deploy the punchlininess you'd hear in a sitcom or like a comedy show or something. Yeah, I kind of just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, speaking of readings, I just think like, there's the poet voice and like stuff that I'm just not interested in. And like obviously, you know, what I get from consuming media is like lines that are funny or like kind of different points of view. Like if I slot myself into kind of somebody else's point of view, and just I think, or letting yourself be for a moment kind of suspended in this, alternative reality that isn't your own. And I think like all of those things, or watching something in a different language, right? Like I think um all of these things like uh train your brain, or like to think differently about things. And like, and when you revisit, I think occurrences that, or things that have happened in your past, I think you naturally will have a different lens, for better or worse. And like, like it's, I always try to seek out ways to kind of distort my own understanding or appreciation for like daily kind of occurrences, or things that I feel strongly about, and in my own personal background and history or whatever. And I think comedy is a really, it's just it's just a great conduit for that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Jake, do you have anything, like any questions that like thematically go with that? Because I also want to talk about lists and listing too.
Yeah. I yeah, I guess it's like I don't know, the more I'm thinking about this book and I guess where it sits in the greater contemporary poetic moment. It feels like in interacting with Jankin, and it has been kind of illustrative of this point too. I don't know. It feels like there was this like great crescendo of sincerity that kind of like ended like like 10 or 8 years ago, maybe even shorter. But because I was in grad school, I guess 6 or 7 years ago at this point, and that type of writing that we're talking about, that like deeply like dramatic and like my like emotions are on the page type of like poetry was quite in vogue. And then I think maybe, I mean, I'm wondering, like, as a writer or in like as a person, where when do you think this kind of like moment of like sincerity, like really like, or like that brand of sincerity sort of ended, and why? I mean, COVID feels like I mean, it's like hard to look at like the contemporary moment of just being in the United States or the Western world and like take anything sincerely or seriously. Um, and so like, yeah, I think like, maybe I'm answering my own question here, is that like, um, it just feels like every institution that we have is like kind of like crumbling and being revealed as like full of pedophiles every single day. And so like, uh, and so it's like, yeah, like, I don't give a shit like how heartbroken you are in your poetry. Like, please, like, just like say something that like feels a little bit more true. And yeah, I guess like, yeah, I guess I'm thinking about where we are as like a, I don't know, as a society, and how this type of writing fits into it. And I feel like it's like, it's like the perfect writing for the moment. And yeah, Michael, you can comment on that as well if you'd like. But I'm just kind of thinking about like the end of sincerity and the beginning of where we are now.
Well, um I think a lot of poetry is really samey, and it manages to like say nothing. And like, not only am I not interested in what you're saying, like you aren't really saying anything. And so like it's this weird, I call it empty calories. Like it's just like, okay, like you're in workshop and you had to turn in 5 pages, right? And like, but on the other hand, or on the opposite side of that, or on the other side of the coin, is like people are afraid of offending someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like it's really, so they'd rather say nothing. Like they're either incapable of saying anything new, um, or they're like so afraid that their opinion is they're gonna get canceled or something. And I think we're moving away from that.
Yeah.
But it's really timid. I think it's cowardice. And I think a lot of people like don't have distinctive work because it's all like subway poems and like Brooklyn, shenanigan poems. It's just like, okay, well, I've read this like 50,000 times. When I'm reading submissions or when I'm judging contests and stuff, like like I think I always surprise people with who I pick to win because they never sound like me. They never look like me. Um, which I think a lot of contests, like, a lot of judges, I think, reflexively pick people who do the thing that they do. And I try to stay away from that. And, there's only so many ways to write, a coming out poem, or not that these things are, insignificant, but I think, like if you're reading about Pulse nightclub for the 80th time, like, there's a limit to how much newness you can bring, right? And that's not to minimize, some of these events and their impacts and so forth, but like in terms of what we're doing, um, you want to offer something interesting, you want to try and have a new perspective, uh, and even if you don't agree with that perspective, you can still offer it, right? And really, bring it up for discussion, I think.
the th- the perspective comments got me thinking about I was reading sort of like internet discourse about how there's no sort of very critical reviews anymore because the only time you're sort of allowed to be critical about a piece of art is if you can find something sort of ethically or like morally indefensible about the art or the person that's made it. um and I don't know, I feel like that same sort of impulse, like people that are creating poetry or people that create fiction, what have you, like sort of kind of like adopt that too. Like they don't want to sort of, I don't know, they don't want to take a stab at the world unless it's sort of a very sort of like easy type of target. Yeah, yeah. Which is
I
not
mean,
to, which I will say, I'm not, that doesn't mean like, oh, shit on people, punch downward or whatever. But I don't know. Yeah, there's,
well,
yeah,
because I
not
think
not
it,
a yeah, not a full thought. Sorry.
I no, I think it really goes to like you don't want to offend someone again in a different, maybe in like professionally. And what if you need a blurb from them, like, or what
Yeah.
if they're on a panel and like they're judging your thing for some award, and like it's, well, part of the problem is this kind of incestuousness of it, but also like I think, I mean, it goes back to what I said earlier, like, it's just cowardice, I think, and people, I don't think you're truly committed to what you're doing if you're being so timid about, like, offending somebody who probably wouldn't even read the review in whatever rat fuck daily or whatever, like, what are the and I actually read something, before the days of the internet, about criticism, and like people would criticize their friends, and like in Canadian journals or in like some other journals that they, West Coast or whatever, and like that was like permissible, and like people wouldn't be offended about it. And so, like, I guess with the internet it's a little dicey, but like, um it really stems from the same problem, which is like people just don't want to say anything that offends someone, whether it's for wokeness or like, like, unless it's like you said, like some guy who is me too'd and like an easy kind of like takedown.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you think I've been thinking a lot about like just like the environment of being in New York lately, and it does. I mean, I feel like people in New York are particularly less worried about offending people, because I think there is like a certain currency available to like, um, I don't know, people that are willing to. There's a lot of like shock jock stuff going on, I think, in New York media at large, to the point where it's like a lot of stuff that I encounter feels like people are like almost like being like edgier for just the sake of doing it for no substantive reason, like, and it kind of like to the point of like on like a conversational level, like sometimes you'll like talk with people like while you're out, and they'll just like say some like overly based shit, and you're like what are you doing? Like you like don't have to like impress me with this. But but I do think the environment of New York does make it feel like to the point where like, I'll we like put out a cover with like the NYPD like fucking each other and snorting coke, and like it didn't feel like this like it feels like testy, but it wasn't until like like I like got on the phone with like my mom, and she was like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And I was like, "Oh, like finally!" Like everyone else I've shown this to is just like, "Oh hell yeah, nice." Where it's like, so I don't know. I mean, it's I guess like being in New York is. Do you think about the like I guess like the allowances of being here versus being elsewhere? I mean, it's like quite. It's just like simply like less risky to like say stuff that is well, it is and it isn't. I mean, as soon as you like get into like the place of like challenging like someone who is like in the inside of the industry and like their position in the hang, like it can get pretty like bloodthirsty. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, how much do you think about I guess the environment of like writing in New York as like influential and like the way that you approach all this?
Well, I think everyone's from a different place. So like it's like what's the New York? Like what's that? I don't want to name names, but that these poems are about like, oh my god, I don't know why. These poems that are like, oh, like I was on a Brooklyn rooftop and people said like, why don't you write about being gay and being Asian or whatever. Like I think like that just sounds like bullshit. Like nobody ever confronted anybody about why they don't write about that stuff. Certainly not in New York. That hasn't been my experience. I think like about the identity thing, I think, like in reviews of my stuff, like nobody really talks about like race or, I mean, they mention it, I guess, but like they don't really delve into like, oh, this is so core to their work. And like in many ways, yeah, I'm just not interested in kind of um people who write about identity and 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 I don't think people in New York are interested in that really either. um and so I think like the difference for me like in the city versus elsewhere, I think that's a key difference, which is like, if I'm visiting somewhere and lecturing, like I get those kinds of questions more. But in the city, I virtually never get like, "Oh, what like how did this, world event, you know, impact your poetry?" You know?
That's definitely. I feel like that's my experience in New York too. For the very slim New York experience I have, like I don't know. I feel when I did my reading for my book, like people sort of will ask about I don't know, like ask about the funnier parts of it, or but if I perform in the more university context, it's oh, does this relate to your research in some way? I don't know. It could becomes more about me as a sort of self as opposed to like oh I want to know like what's going on in that image you did. I don't know. It feels like intellectualized in sort of like a personal intersecting type of way. Um
Well, I
yeah.
was talking with someone who is in a program, and they were like, "Oh, I hate that the fans of my work are white people." And I'm like, "Well, why do you care?" I don't understand. I've just never got that. Like, I'm sure a lot of people that like my work are white, but I mean, so, a lot of people are white in this country. That's not news. And so like I just don't this reflexive kind of virtue signaling or like, like I think it touches upon a few of the things that we've talked about so far, which is like what kinds of work people claim they like to read, or like there's like kind of a litmus testy kind of like acceptable list of poets to like, and then there's kind of the less accepted. um And I just don't understand any of it really. Like, I think it's just my mind just isn't g like, why do I care who like, if somebody white likes my stuff? Like, why is that, you know? Like, I don't wanna get into the race thing too much, but, like, I just my job, I think, is to put out poetry that I wanna read, that I think people will find entertaining and funny, and even if it, they disagree with it, I think, maybe they'll come away, having learned something new, or, gained some sort of perspective on, on an issue maybe they haven't even thought about. But like, that I think that's my job as a poet. Like I also don't believe that, all poetry is political or whatever, whatever bullshit people say.
Yeah. Everybody's money's green. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I do want to say though, to all my white fans, you can go fuck you can go fuck yourselves. No. um, cool. Okay. K- k- yeah, we got enough. We got 15 minutes here. Do you mind
Mhm.
if I do a sort of a more formal question about really about the list?
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I guess question about lists, poems, poetic lists, and lists
Mhm.
as a method of poesis. So I was joking with
Mhm.
a fellow writer editor guy about like list poems and how one will read like so a few of them and it's clearly just it's just the poet listing down shit without any real deliberation like at all, like no sauce, no funk. It's just it took like 8 minutes to write it. And when I read things a bright boy can do, like many of the poems, even the ones that are not sort of like specifically distinguished as lists, possess a sort of list-like cadence. But I don't find the cadence to ever be like stagnant because it's totally evident you've chiseled at what you're trying to do with the material and the imageries. Like, do you think of this project as particularly listy? What was that an intentional maneuver, or did like the muse of lists sort of unconsciously sway you towards that form? Or also, am I imposing the stricture of lists here? Like, really, this is very much a question. Like, what's going on with lists?
Um, well, I think every poem is kind of a list, right? Like, I think it's kind of inescapable. In terms of how I construct them, I mean, they are lists of like collected random thoughts that I edit and kind of sometimes censor. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it is a listy book. I think all of my books are kind of have at least one kind of formal list poem, done in the way that I do poems. But I think, like, I think rather than think of them as lists, I think they're more collections of random thoughts with kind of my lens or my point of view, which I think you've identified as like something that's missing from the other types of lists that other people may be creating. Like there isn't much, like, well, first of all, you can't tell who wrote the poem, or what they're bringing to the table, or who they are and why should we care, right? Like, but it also can't be really kind of scattered thoughts like organized into a list, I think, if that makes sense. Like, I think they're like, and I hate to say craft, but like the craft of it is like, am I impressing upon this list with my lens that only I could bring, or that my thumbprint, you know, on this list? Um, Whereas I think a lot of like other people are just like, oh, like these are things that I saw at the store and blah blah blah, right? Like,
Mhm.
or like, um, um, death counts or whatever, right? Like, um, or lists of military bases with no kind of context, for example.
Yeah, like I don't know. I see a lot of the time, or like here, here's stuff in my bag, or here's the foods that like are in my fridge or something, and then it will, it will be literally the things in the bag or in the fridge or whatever. And I'm like, you read those type of things, and it's just like, you gotta lie about the shit in your bag for the sake of crafting something kind of surreal or something. But I don't see that with your stuff. I see very much like, I don't know, an opening to the surprise,
Yeah,
of
like
what's life.
I think it has to be in service of something. Like
Yeah.
we have to arrive somewhere, right? Like it can't just be like, stuff I saw on my walk, right? Like but I think another iteration like I touched upon which is like of lists is like kind of atrocity porn or like
Mm-hmm.
kind of disaster porn or whatever like and just kind of death counts and like whatever like or just a list of wars or like but like which is fine but like what am I supposed to take away from that like we agree war is bad and so and I really think like that really kind of intersects with like this kind of like fad poetry which is like these political moments or like these because I think my work touches upon politics or political issues but they're never kind of in my view like, "Oh, this is a thing that was in the news and people will care about it but they'll forget about it next month and let me get at this poem about pulse or like whatever." And there's other ones we can name but like and I just don't think again that the fault with those is like what is this in service of like it's you're not telling me anything new factually or otherwise. You're not telling me how to look at it different. Like you're not even offering your own perspective. So like what is the point of this, So like I think undergirding a lot of my work is like, oh, I do want to tell you what I think, but do it in a way that maybe is not too kind of on the nose and in your face about it. But I think at the end you come away with it knowing where I stand and maybe you find that compelling, maybe you don't, but at least you know where I stand.
Yeah, I think a lot of I don't know. I think there's like a wariness or a fear to like even sort of obliquely polemicize with like a poem, which is not to say, you need to make very obvious grand sweeping statements, but a lot of times people forget that like, oh hey, I can intimate something, in the subtext of the poem. Yeah.
Nice.
Oh, one last this
Oh,
we don't have to include this in the actual conversation.
Uh,
Is I love you but I've chosen darkness. Is that a reference to the band or to the book?
I don't remember. Is it a band?
It is a band, but
Oh, I don't remember.
I just want to know. It's only because that's like a band that I was like really into, like I don't know, like 7 years ago, and then
Oh, really?
I saw the title, and then I was like, oh shit,
I'll have to look them up.
they're like a gothic type post punk band, but they're
Oh.
pretty cool. But yeah, I was just that name was like, oh shit, I remember that band, and I really liked them. But yeah,
No, but I like that poem because it talks about food, right?
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think yeah, I don't really do food poems. I mean, I'll mention food, but it won't be like I like there are entire books about them now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The the dripping pomegranate. I see a lot of dripping pomegranate poems. Um,
Really?
yeah, I feel like, which I don't have. I don't eat pomegranates a ton, but I never. They didn't seem. They're so seed based. They never seemed like a super drippy
is
fruit.
that
But
the is that the
Oh,
is that the fucking what's her face poem?
maybe.
What's
I
the
mean,
one about
I
what's the one about getting fingered?
I feel like there's a lot
No,
of the.
yeah,
There's a lot
you
of the.
guys know what I'm talking about. The
Even in
Ruby Cower. That's her
uh,
name. You guys don't know what I'm talking about.
I she has one about honey and being fingered, and there's like
That's what I'm
honey.
talking about. Okay,
I don't
yeah,
think that was I
oh,
don't think that
not a
was
pomegranate.
not a pomegranate one,
I
but I
didn't
will.
realize that was about them getting fingered. I don't think.
It's It's okay. Well, maybe not. I read that as fingering.
I will say, just I mean, even in our in our
Dude, I'm fucking sick in the head, man.
on our slush pile, I mean, fruit stuff comes up a lot. I feel like
Yeah.
that's a sort of in vogue type of image. Some people fuck with it in a cool way, but yeah, I mean, it sort of lends itself to drippiness.
Doesn't it literally say there's like fingers in it has fingers in there and it's talking about
Then maybe, I mean, there's probably more than one. I'll be totally honest. There's probably a honey one, a pomegranate one, a
Mhm.
peach one.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway, I think we should bring back that type of stuff. Like
That's
it's
that's what we'll end with that.
yeah.
Pomegranate, pomegranate drool.
Anyway, Michael, thanks for coming on. Um,
Sure.
um, yeah, yeah, I guess. Thanks. Um, buy your book anywhere.
Mhm.
Yeah, do you have anything you want to plug too, like specific regarding the book or regarding anything you're doing? This is the plug moment.
Oh, I have a chapbook coming out. It's called Heroes. It'll be out, I think, sometime in the fall, late fall. It's coming out with uh 845 press out of Canada. And I think people like me up there. And the cover is really great. I found the art. He's a really well-known, you'll see, French uh kind of cartoonist. And so I always have great covers, and so they make for great gifts. And so yeah, so keep an eye out for that.